The arrival. The evening was alive with the hum of the city as Jonathan made his way to the local concert hall. The streets were crowded, a typical scene for a Friday night, with people heading out to enjoy whatever entertainment the city offered. Jonathan, carrying his guitar case, maneuvered through the throngs with a practiced ease. Inside the concert hall, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Tonight was an open mic event, and the community's excitement was palpable. Jonathan was a regular, known for his heartfelt performances and skillful guitar play. As he set up on stage, his eyes caught those of a stranger in the crowd. She stood out not just because of her unfamiliar face, but because of her striking appearance, with features that seemed almost otherworldly. After his set, which garnered appreciative applause, Jonathan stepped off the stage and made his way to the bar, where the stranger was now seated alone, sipping what looked like water. "Hi," Jonathan started, extending a hand. "I'm Jonathan. I don't think I've seen you here before. Are you new in town?" The woman looked up, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Yes, you could say that. I'm Arya. I'm here to learn, actually. About music, about humans." Jonathan chuckled, pulling up a stool beside her. "Well, you've come to the right place for one of those things, at least. This city lives and breathes music. What do you want to know?" Arya's response was thoughtful. "Everything. The way music influences emotions, how it binds people together." He was intrigued. Music can do a lot of things. It can heal a broken heart, or rally a crowd. Depends on what you're looking for. What brings you to it? "I come from far away," Arya said, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Where I'm from, we don't experience emotions quite like humans do. Your music has depths that I wish to understand." Jonathan considered this. "I could show you around, introduce you to different styles. Music is a big world." "I would like that very much," Arya replied, her gaze settling on his guitar case. "Do you teach?" "I can," Jonathan agreed, feeling a spark of excitement at the prospect. "Why don't we start tomorrow? There's a lot to see and hear." Their conversation continued, the initial strangeness giving way to a budding friendship. They discussed genres, favorite songs, and the peculiarities of musical theory. Jonathan found himself explaining not just the mechanics of music, but the way it intertwined with human culture and emotion. As the night drew to a close, they exchanged contact information. Arya's enthusiasm was infectious, and Jonathan felt a renewed vigor for his craft. He hadn't planned on making a new friend tonight, but as he watched Arya step out into the cool night air, he felt a keen anticipation for what the next day would bring. Their adventure in music, and perhaps in understanding each other, was just beginning. Chapter 2. The First Note. The following morning, Jonathan met Arya at a small, bustling cafe near the music club from the previous night. The cafe was a local favorite, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and the low hum of morning chatter. Arya was already seated at a corner table, her attention captured by a group of street performers visible through the cafe's large front window. "Good morning, Arya," Jonathan greeted as he approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need one of these." "Good morning, Jonathan," Arya replied, her eyes lighting up. "Thank you, I'm still getting used to the taste, but I find it quite fascinating." Jonathan chuckled as he sat down. "It's an acquired taste for some." "So, ready to dive into the world of music?" "Yes, very much," Arya answered eagerly. "What is our first lesson?" "Well, I thought we'd start with something basic. Piano. It's versatile and a good way to introduce the fundamental concepts of music theory. There's a music shop not far from here where we can go." They finished their coffees and walked to the music shop. The owner, Mr. Thompson, greeted Jonathan warmly. Back again, John? Who's your friend? This is Aria, Jonathan introduced. She's here to learn about music. Aria, Mr. Thompson is a legend in these parts. He knows everything there is to know about musical instruments. Pleasure to meet you, Aria, Mr. Thompson said, offering a hand. Any friend of Jonathan's is a friend of mine. What are we learning today? Piano, if that's all right, Jonathan replied. Of course, right this way. Mr. Thompson led them to a small practice room at the back of the shop, where an old, well-loved, upright piano stood. Jonathan started by showing Aria the basic layout of the keys, explaining octaves and scales. Aria listened intently, her fingers hesitantly mirroring his movements. Like this, she asked, pressing down a C major chord. Exactly like that, Jonathan encouraged. Now try to play a simple scale. As Aria practiced, Jonathan and Mr. Thompson discussed music's impact on human culture. Aria was quick to pick up the patterns, her curiosity growing with each note. Music is not just sound, Aria, Jonathan explained as he guided her through a melody. It's emotion, story, connection. It transcends language and culture. Aria absorbed his words, her fingers slowly becoming more confident on the keys. It's beautiful, she said softly. It makes me feel more than I have before. That's the power of music, Mr. Thompson added from the doorway, having watched the lesson with a smile. It reaches parts of us nothing else can. After a couple of hours, they took a break. Mr. Thompson offered to show Aria some other instruments, each with its own story and sound. From string instruments to wind and percussion, Aria experienced a whirlwind tour of musical diversity. The morning turned into afternoon, and the trio found themselves back at the cafe, discussing everything Aria had learned. Jonathan was impressed with her quick grasp of musical concepts, and Aria was eager to explore more. "Thank you, Jonathan, Mr. Thompson," Aria said, her expression one of genuine gratitude. "Today has been enlightening. I look forward to learning more." "There's plenty more to see and hear," Jonathan promised. "Tomorrow, how about we check out a different music scene? Maybe some live jazz." "I would like that," Aria responded, a spark of excitement in her voice. "I am eager to understand all the facets of human emotion through your music." As they parted ways, Jonathan felt a new sense of purpose. Teaching Aria was not just about imparting knowledge. It was a journey into the very heart of what made music so profoundly human. Chapter 3. Lessons in Harmony. The next day, Jonathan and Aria decided to meet at a local jazz club known for its vibrant atmosphere and exceptional musicians. The club was nestled in a lively neighborhood, its dimly lit interior always buzzing with the eclectic energy of music lovers. As they entered, the soothing strains of a saxophone greeted them, weaving through the chatter of the audience. "Jazz is a lot about improvisation," Jonathan explained as they found a seat near the stage. "It's not just playing notes, it's about playing feelings. Watch the musicians. They communicate with each other through their instruments." Aria observed intently, her eyes moving from the saxophonist to the pianist, absorbing the seamless flow of music. "It's like they're having a conversation without words," she remarked. "Exactly," Jonathan nodded. "Music is a universal language. Maybe the truest one we have." They spent the first set engrossed in the performance, the musician's passion evident in every note. During the intermission, Jonathan introduced Aria to the band. The musicians were intrigued by Aria's interest and her background, offering to show her some basics. "Do you want to try?" The pianist, a friendly man named Marcus, offered, motioning towards the piano on stage. Aria looked at Jonathan, who encouraged her with a nod. She stepped up, her hands slightly trembling as she touched the keys. Marcus stood beside her, guiding her through a simple blues scale. "Feel the rhythm, don't just follow it," Marcus advised. "Let it flow through you." Aria took a deep breath and began to play, slowly at first, but with growing confidence. Jonathan watched proudly as she caught on, her earlier lessons giving her enough knowledge to keep up. "You're a natural," Marcus complimented her as they finished. "You have a good feel for the music." "Thank you," Aria responded, her face lit up with joy. "This feels incredible, like speaking a language I didn't know I understood." As the band prepared for their next set, Jonathan and Aria returned to their seats. "What did you think?" he asked. "It's exhilarating," she replied. "Music is more profound and beautiful than I had ever imagined." The rest of the evening passed with the club's atmosphere growing even more charged. The band played several numbers, each one different from the last, showcasing the diversity and adaptability of jazz. After the show, they walked out into the cool night air, the sounds of the city mingling with the lingering notes of jazz in their minds. "Music seems to be a gateway to human emotions," Aria mused as they walked. "Each style and song tells a different story, touches a different part of the heart." Jonathan smiled, pleased with her insight. "And there are as many stories and emotions as there are people. Tomorrow, how about we explore something completely different? Maybe some classical music? It's another side of the spectrum." "I would love that," Aria agreed, her enthusiasm undimmed. "Every day with you brings a new understanding, not just of music, but of life itself." They agreed to meet the next morning for another musical adventure, both unaware of just how deep their exploration would go. As they parted ways, the melodies of the night played on in their minds, a reminder of the harmonious connection they were building, note by note. Chapter 4. The Alien's Song. The morning brought a crisp freshness that only a day dedicated to the arts could enhance. Jonathan met Aria outside a grand concert hall, an architectural marvel known for its classical music performances. Today, they were attending a rehearsal of the city's symphony orchestra, an experience Jonathan hoped would show Aria the structured yet emotive world of classical music. "Classical music can be more formal than jazz," Jonathan explained as they took their seats in the nearly empty hall. "But it's just as passionate. It's about the build-up, the climax, and the resolution, much like a good story." Aria nodded, her eyes taking in the vast space with its soaring ceilings and intricate moldings. "It's beautiful here," she said, "and it feels different, more solemn." As the orchestra began to tune, the conductor, a venerable man with a commanding presence named Maestro Ricci, approached them. Jonathan introduced Aria, explaining her mission to understand human culture through music. "Music is the soul of civilization," Maestro Ricci remarked, his voice resonant in the quiet hall. "You've chosen a fine tutor in Jonathan. Today, you'll hear pieces that have moved hearts for centuries." Thankful for the warm welcome, Aria listened intently as the orchestra started to play. The music filled the hall, sweeping melodies that ebbed and flowed like the tides. She felt the vibrations through the floor, the seats, the very air around her. During a break, Maestro Ricci invited them to the stage. "Would you like to try conducting? It's quite a different perspective from here." Aria looked at Jonathan, who urged her on with an excited nod. She stepped up to the conductor's podium, the maestro showing her how to hold the baton and lead the orchestra. With a deep breath, Aria raised her arms, and on her cue, the orchestra resumed, following her tentative yet earnest lead. "It's about feeling the music, anticipating it," Maestro Ricci coached gently. "Let it guide you." Aria's initial stiffness gave way to a smoother, more natural motion, her movements becoming one with the music. Jonathan watched, amazed at her quick adaptability and deep connection with the music. After the rehearsal, they thanked Maestro Ricci, who invited Aria to return any time. Music is a lifelong journey, he told her. You're always welcome to explore it with us. As they left the concert hall, Arya was contemplative. I understand now why humans cherish music. It's not just sound. It's a living, breathing presence in your lives. That's exactly right, Jonathan agreed. It's a vital part of who we are. They decided to spend the rest of the day exploring a local music museum, walking through exhibits that detailed the history of various musical genres, instruments, and notable musicians. Arya was particularly drawn to an exhibit on folk music from around the world. This music tells the stories of the people, she noted, listening to recordings of traditional songs. It's more than entertainment. It's history, identity. Yes, and every culture has its own version, Jonathan added, pleased with her insight. Music is a universal, yet uniquely personal language. Inspired by the day's experiences, Arya shared a melody from her world as they sat in the museum's courtyard. Her song was haunting, filled with nuances and scales unfamiliar to the human ear. Jonathan listened, moved by the beauty and strangeness of her music. Your world's music. It's beautiful. It's like nothing I've ever heard. Arya smiled. And now it's part of our shared journey. Thank you, Jonathan, for this day. Your world, through music, is magnificent. They ended the day with a promise to meet again, each encounter deepening their mutual understanding and appreciation of not just music, but also of each other's worlds. Chapter 5. The Touch of Understanding. As their musical journey deepened, Jonathan decided it was time for Arya to experience the intimate connection of chamber music. He arranged for them to attend a small, private performance at a local artist's loft. The setting was cozy, with soft lighting and plush cushions scattered around for guests to sit on the floor, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. "This is different from the concerts we've been to," Arya observed as they settled into a spot near the front. "Chamber music is meant to be intimate," Jonathan explained. "It's about the closeness of the musicians to each other and to the audience. It's very personal, very emotional. The musicians, a quartet of 2 violins, a viola, and a cello, began to play. The music was a complex tapestry of sounds, each instrument distinct yet perfectly harmonized with the others. Arya was captivated by the interaction between the musicians, their subtle cues and nods, the way their instruments conversed. After the performance, the musicians mingled with the audience. Jonathan introduced Arya to them, and they were intrigued by her unique perspective on their music. "Do you play any instruments yourself?" asked one of the violinists, a man named Karl. Arya shook her head. "I'm just beginning to understand and appreciate your forms of music," she replied. Karl smiled warmly. "The best way to understand music might just be to make some yourself. Would you like to try the violin?" With guidance, Arya carefully took the violin and bow. Following Karl's instructions, she drew the bow across the strings, her initial awkwardness giving way to a smoother, more controlled sound. "It's all about the feel," Karl encouraged. "Let the music flow through you." Jonathan watched, impressed by Arya's ability to adapt and learn. "You're getting the hang of it," he said. "I feel the music differently when I play," Arya said, handing the violin back to Karl. "It's as if I'm part of the creation process, not just an observer." "That's exactly it," Jonathan agreed. "Playing music connects you to it in a very direct way." They thanked the musicians and left the loft, walking through the city as the evening lights began to twinkle on. The streets were quiet, the hustle of the day fading into the tranquil night. "I've been thinking," Arya began, her voice thoughtful. "Music isn't just an art or a form of communication. It's a bridge between beings, between cultures." Jonathan nodded. "Music can express what words cannot. It transcends boundaries." They stopped at a small park, finding a bench under a tree. The city sounds were muted here, the space peaceful and secluded. "Jonathan, could you teach me more about creating music? Not just playing, but composing?" Arya asked, her eyes eager. "Of course," Jonathan replied, thrilled by her enthusiasm. "Composing is about expressing your own emotions and experiences through music. We can start tomorrow if you like." "Thank you," Arya said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I feel that through music, I'm learning not just about your world, but also about myself." They sat together in comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts about the day's revelations. Music had brought them together, and now it was leading them to discover not just new worlds, but new depths within themselves. As the night deepened, their conversation drifted to dreams, aspirations, and the infinite possibilities that music could unfold between their two very different worlds. Chapter 6. Exploring Worlds. The next morning found Jonathan and Arya at a bustling market downtown, an area known not only for its diverse array of goods, but also for the street performers who often entertained the crowds. Jonathan had suggested this outing as a way to inspire Arya's burgeoning interest in composing, to find the rhythms and melodies of everyday human life. "As a composer, you can find music everywhere," Jonathan explained as they walked past stalls selling everything from vintage records to handmade jewelry. "Even the sounds of the market, the chatter of people, the clinking of coins, can inspire a melody." Arya listened intently, her senses absorbing the cacophony of sounds. "It's all so vibrant," she remarked, her eyes wide with fascination. Each sound, each voice, could be a note in a composition. They stopped to watch a street musician, a young man with a guitar, singing with a raw, passionate voice that drew a small crowd. Jonathan nodded toward the performer. "See how he uses his music to connect with people. His emotions are palpable in every note." Arya watched, moved by the performance. When the song ended, she approached the musician. "Your music is very touching. Do you write your own songs?" The musician, whose name was Tom, smiled appreciatively. "Yeah, I do. It's how I express myself." "You a musician too?" "I'm learning," Arya replied. "I'm trying to understand how to capture emotions like you do." Tom's interest was piqued. "Well, if you want, I can show you some basics of songwriting. It's all about feeling and experience." Jonathan and Arya spent the next hour with Tom, discussing song structures, lyric writing, and the emotional core of music. Tom shared his process, and Arya took notes, eager to apply these lessons to her own creative endeavors. After thanking Tom for his insights, Jonathan suggested they continue their exploration. "Let's keep this inspirational journey going. There's an art gallery nearby featuring sound installations. It might give you another perspective on how sounds can be used in art." The gallery was a modern space filled with intriguing pieces that utilized sound in various ways. One installation involved a series of small rooms, each playing different sounds that, when stood in the center, blended into a harmonious whole. "It's like a mosaic of sounds," Arya observed, fascinated by the way the individual pieces came together to form a cohesive experience. "Exactly," Jonathan agreed. "In music composition, sometimes the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Think of an orchestra, separate instruments creating a single piece of music." Inspired by the day's experiences, Arya felt a surge of creativity. "I think I'm ready to try composing something," she declared as they left the gallery. "I want to create a piece that reflects what I've learned about human emotions and the beauty of your world." Jonathan was supportive. "Let's head back to my place. You can use my keyboard and whatever else you need. I'll help however I can." Back at his apartment, Jonathan set up a small workstation for Arya with a keyboard and some basic recording equipment. Arya started experimenting with different sounds and patterns, trying to encapsulate the emotions and experiences of the past few days. As she worked, Jonathan watched in admiration, impressed by her quick learning curve and her ability to express her thoughts and feelings through music. The afternoon faded into evening, with the only sounds in the room being the notes floating from the keyboard, each one a testament to Aria's journey into the human heart through music. Chapter 7. Crescendo of Hearts. The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm glow over the city as Jonathan and Aria left his apartment. Energized by her first attempt at composing, Aria suggested they attend a local culinary festival that evening. Music and food share a lot in common, she noted. Both can convey stories and evoke emotions. Perhaps understanding more about how humans experience food will inspire my music further. Jonathan agreed enthusiastically, leading the way to the festival, which was alive with sights, sounds, and smells from around the world. The air was filled with the aromas of spices and cooking, mingling with the laughter and chatter of the crowd. Each dish here tells a part of a culture's story, much like a piece of music, Jonathan explained as they sampled a variety of dishes, from spicy Thai noodles to rich Italian gelato. Aria was fascinated by the diversity. The flavors are so distinct, so expressive. It's another form of communication, isn't it? It is, Jonathan confirmed. Chefs are like composers, blending ingredients to create something new and beautiful. As they walked, Aria noticed a small stage where a local band was setting up. "Shall we listen for a while?" she suggested. The duo made their way to the front as the band began a lively set that fused elements of jazz and folk music, creating an upbeat rhythm that had the crowd tapping their feet and nodding their heads in time. The music seemed to invigorate Aria. "I see how the energy of the crowd changes with the music. It's like watching a wave ripple through them." "Music has power," Jonathan said, his eyes on the band. "It can change moods, connect strangers, even heal. That's what makes it so universal." Feeling inspired, Aria shared an idea with Jonathan. "I'd like to compose a piece that blends what I've learned about human music with melodies from my culture. Something that might help bridge our worlds." Jonathan loved the idea. "That sounds incredible, Aria. Let's arrange a small concert. You could perform it, and we could invite everyone who's helped you along the way." The rest of the evening was spent in planning. They discussed potential venues, guests, and the logistics of setting up a performance. By the time they said good night, they had a solid plan in place, and Aria was brimming with excitement about showcasing her work. Over the next few weeks, Aria worked tirelessly on her composition, using Jonathan's apartment as her makeshift studio. Jonathan was always there, offering feedback and encouragement, ensuring she had everything she needed to succeed. As the day of the concert approached, the anticipation built. Finally, the night arrived. The small auditorium they had booked was filled with friends, musicians, artists, and a few curious locals who had heard about the unique performance. As Aria took the stage, the room hushed, the audience's attention focused entirely on her. Jonathan watched from the wings, his heart full of pride as Aria began to play. The music was unlike anything the audience had heard before, a fusion of human and alien melodies that was both haunting and uplifting. It spoke of unity and understanding, of the beauty of diversity and the bond of shared experiences. The final note lingered in the air, met with a moment of stunned silence. Then the room erupted into applause, the audience on their feet, moved by the profound expression of cross-cultural harmony. After the concert, many came up to congratulate Aria, expressing their amazement and appreciation. "Your music made me feel connected," one guest said, a sentiment echoed by many others. As the crowd began to disperse, Jonathan approached Aria, his eyes shining with emotion. "You did it," he said. "You really did it." Aria smiled, her eyes reflecting a deep satisfaction. We did it, Jonathan. With your help. This is only the beginning, isn't it? It is, Jonathan agreed, his voice filled with excitement for the future. There's so much more we can do, so much more to explore and create together. As they left the auditorium together, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, their world a little larger, and their future filled with limitless possibilities. Chapter 8. The Harmony Complete. The impact of Aria's performance continued to ripple through the community in the days that followed. Inspired by the success of the concert, Jonathan and Aria decided to collaborate on a series of workshops for local musicians and enthusiasts who wanted to explore the fusion of different musical styles and cultures. On a bright Saturday morning, they met at a community center where the first workshop was to be held. Jonathan was setting up chairs in a large, sunlit room when Aria arrived, carrying several instruments, some from her world and others familiar to humans. "Good morning, Jonathan. I brought some instruments that I thought could help illustrate today's topic," Aria said cheerfully as she set them down on the stage. "Morning, Aria. These look fascinating," Jonathan replied, examining a particularly exotic-looking string instrument. "I think everyone will be intrigued by these." As people began to filter in, Jonathan and Aria greeted each newcomer with warm smiles. Soon, the room was buzzing with the chatter of excited participants, eager to learn and experiment. "Welcome, everyone," Jonathan began once everyone had settled. "Today, we're going to explore how music transcends cultural boundaries. We'll look at different musical scales, rhythms, and how they can be blended to create something unique and beautiful." Aria took over, demonstrating some basic scales from her culture. "These might sound a bit unusual to your ears," she explained, playing a series of notes that indeed sounded foreign yet strangely captivating. "But when combined with familiar scales, they can create a harmony that is both new and intriguing." The participants were divided into small groups, each given a set of instruments to experiment with. Jonathan and Aria moved among the groups, offering guidance and encouragement as the room filled with a cacophony of sounds. "How do you think these sounds make you feel?" Aria asked one group, who were trying to blend a rhythmic alien drum pattern with a classical guitar melody. "It's a bit disorienting at first, but also exciting," one participant answered. "It's like discovering a new language." "That's a great way to put it," Jonathan agreed. "Music is a language that can express things words cannot." As the workshop drew to a close, the participants were invited to share their experiments with the group. Each performance was met with enthusiastic applause and a lively discussion about the techniques and emotions involved. "Thank you all for being so open and creative today," Aria said, addressing the group. "This is exactly what we hoped for, a sharing of ideas and cultures through the universal language of music." Jonathan added, "We hope this is just the beginning of your exploration. Music has the power to bring us together, to teach us about ourselves and each other. Keep experimenting, keep learning." As people began to leave, chatting excitedly about what they had learned, Jonathan turned to Aria. "You know, I think we've started something really special here." Aria nodded, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of fulfillment. "Yes, we have. It's amazing to see how music can bridge worlds." They tidied up the room, putting away the instruments and stacking chairs. As they worked, they discussed plans for more workshops and even a possible festival celebrating music from various cultures and planets. "Your idea about a festival is brilliant," Aria said. "It could be a beautiful celebration of unity and diversity." "Let's do it," Jonathan said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "A festival where everyone can share their music, their stories. Let's make it happen." As they left the community center, their conversation brimming with ideas, the air seemed to vibrate with the potential of future melodies. They had not only introduced a new sound to the world, but had also woven a tapestry of connections that would continue to grow and resonate, harmonizing the song of area's people with the heartbeat of humanity.